which is cover meeting 8 in the books. For those who's following the book, chapter 5 and chapter 15 and 16. الفولدر أو الفايل اللي موجود في ال LMS, this is the name of the file, meeting 8 activities. If you cannot access it, I already share the folder with you, and I'll send it at the end of the lecture, okay? So, السؤال is gonna this is the question here, okay? So this is the original file. So what they ask us to do, they ask us to write a Java class. Okay, what is name is demo file, and it's going to have an array list, and it's going to have couples of methods, a file, a write to file, a read from a file, and a print list. This is the first class. Then, as usual, whenever we create something, we need to test what we have done. So we always create a test class. We call it test demo file. Okay. In this test demo file, they ask us to create an object of the demo file, and then to call and invoke the methods that we already created in the demo file. This picture is just show you an overall idea of the question. As we usual, we prefer to have a graphical explanation first. So we have a demo file class, which has one attribute or a variable called list, with a type array list that has a content with a type string. And it has 4 methods: fill, write to file, read from a file, and print a list. Later we will create an object or an instance, DL, from a demo file type that is going to invoke 2 methods. What I need you to remember, guys, you remember when we're dealing with a list is a primitive or a reference parameter. Sorry, it's a reference or primitive value. Yes, so it's a references. Then it's a string, so it's an array list. Array list is a pointer here. Then the contents of this array list, which is named list, strings. So string is primitive or references. Again, it's references. That's why you see me here putting a pointer. So we don't have the contents. It's not a primitive. It's not going to be in it. Okay. So let's see what we have on this question. So they ask us to create a demo file class, has a primitive attribute list, called list, so the name of it is list, and the data type is a string list of string. Okay, then you will have a 0 argument that initialize the list to an empty list. They didn't say initialized a list with a certain content. They just said initialize the list with an empty list. The next method is a fill method. What is the job of this method? It is going to go over this list. It is going to go over this list and fill it up with a certain contents. And they already give us the contents, so it's hard-coded. We are not going to get it from a user or from a file. You're going to write it inside the code, which is called hard coding. Sorry, who had a question here? Abdulmanam, what's it's your question. That means 0 parameters. What do you mean 0 parameters? For which one? Okay. So then we will have a method called a write to file. What is this going to do? Yes, the constructor it has 0 arguments. It's not empty. 0 arguments mean it's not going to get an argument, but it's going to initialize the list with an empty list. Okay. Okay, let me make sure I close students' minds. Just give me a second. It's already closed, guys. Okay, then we get to create a write to file method, which is get to write into a file called student.txt that read each line, element on a line. On the example here, we created inside a list and move it into the file. And finally, or not final, this is the one before, we get to read from that file, and they ask us to calculate the average. So we already having students grades, 3 grades. We would like to calculate the average, then insert. After that, replace the list element. At the beginning, the list gets to have this information. We get to replace the element with a new one, which has the average. The last one is print list, which is taking a list and printed on a line. Okay. Okay. So now I need your help, guys. Okay. Lujane, initialize it like I don't get what you mean. Initialize it like I wrote. You're talking about what? Okay, so here first we will create a class called demo file. Good. Not really, no. That's not right, Lujane. We will see now how you initialize it right. This is not the appropriate way. طيب, it's up to you, Omar. So the class is called demo file. First, we would like to create an attribute, private attribute. So what's the modifier here? The first. Do you see my pointer? Okay. So what's the modifier? What is the modifier for this attribute? Private. Thank you. And then, what's the data type of this attribute? So the modifier is private. What the data type? Array list. Good, Regine. And then, this array list of which type? What it has on it? It is string. Okay. And then, what's the name of this attribute? List. Good. Later, they ask us to create a 0 argument constructor that initializes the list to an empty list. Okay. So now, at this stage, when we create this line number 8, it's just going to create a list with a pointer, but it's pointing to null. No, Abdul Manan. It's not this, and not in this way. So line number 8 is just going to initialize the list with a pointer. Now they ask us to make it empty list. So a list now it's going to equal to what? I need you to write the full sentence. A list equal to what? To initialize a new list with an empty just empty list. It's just an empty list. Okay. Any other thoughts? So this is how we initialize it. A new array list string. Good jobs, guys. في كم شخص أجاوبها؟ في نقطة I noticed it. I know some of you just get confused between an array list والlist. تمام؟ It is important. عندكم slide بالmeetings فيها difference between if you would like to add content, if you would like to retrieve content, the difference between a list والarray list. Please go to this slide and make sure you understand it properly. And there is a difference between array list والlist. Some of you initialized the array list as a list, okay? We already discussed this during the class. Okay, so this is this sentence, which is line number 11. What is going to make? This is what it's going to make. It is going to create a list or an array list, which is called list, with no contents. Okay. Now they ask us to create a method called fill that is allow users to fill a list with the following line. So as I said, this is hard-coded sentences. We put the sentences inside the code, but usually this is not the reality. Usually you get the information from a user and you assign it here, okay? So how we can do this? List dot what? To add elements inside an array list. Yes, add. Okay, what if a list is with the type array? How can I add an element to it? Let's assume a list is an array. It's not an array list. How can I add an element to it? Let's assume I would like to add an element to the first place. How I can do this? For a list. For an array. Okay. Any other thoughts? Okay. Good job, guys. Yes. If we would like to add an element, not get, no. As what your friend said, we supposed to put a list, then between square brackets, and then inside it you put a number of the index you would like to access it. So list between square brackets, and then you put an index. Okay. So this is how you add an element into an array. Okay. I know it's a little confusing. That's why I really highly recommend you guys to get back, especially to that slide, which is comparing the array with the array list. Okay, and then we have other methods as well. So after this line, from line 16 to 19, we fill up lists, which are pointer to strings. We have done methods about write to file or read from a file, but before that, we will do one. رضوى, you are on the only one. كل الطلاب عندهم مشكلة بالصوت والصورة ولا بس رضوى؟ Okay, good. Good. So let's complete. Then, we would like to create a method that will help us to print the contents of this slide. One of an efficient way to go over any contents, like if you're having a list, array list, if you're having a file, it's using for each loop. How will for each loop work? For each loop, to create it, first you need to define what you would like to go for each element. معناها أنا راح أمشي على كل محتوى موجود داخل هذا الاري list أو داخل الفايل أو داخل الاري. Okay? But before that, so first you need to define what you would like to go over it. We would like to go over what? We would like to go over a list. Okay. The content of this list, the contents that we're going to go over it one by one. What's the type of it? So here, what is the type of the list element? What is the type here? No, I need you to answer me. What's the type of the element here? String, right? So I would like to create a temporary place called, for example, X. What's the job of this temporary place? Is to get the first element and store it inside this temporary place. That's why I asked you what's the type of this place, because depending on the type, if it's a string, so the type of X is going to be a string. If the type of this element is integer, X will be integer. If this element is, let's say, rectangle, as what we had in the lecture yesterday, it is going to, X is going to define as a rectangle. Okay? So here first, what I'm going to put, for what? You need to define a temporary place to store each element. So at the beginning, what I need to have at the first one? Okay. Yes, so we're going to have for string X. What does that mean? I'm going to create a temporary place called X with a type string, and it's a string because the contents of the list that I would like to go over it one by one is a string. Okay? And then I have the two dots, and then what I have after that? The place that I would like to go over it. So in this case is going to be a list. So here I'm going to go over the first content and I'm going to deal with it. Here you just need to print it. Okay? Yes, you can use the for loop, but it's not an efficient. You need to get used to of for each as well. It's more efficient. And if, for example, you get a question, you don't get confused what that means, okay? So you can practice it and you will find it easy. You just need to practice it several times. Okay? So now, X is going to contain Ali والgrade اللي حق Ali. Good? And it's going to print it out. Going to get back here and ask, does the list still have an element? True. So yes, I'm going to get the next element, Sami, and I'm going to store it on the temporarily place, which is an X. Now I'm going to print the X is going to print Sami. Later, I'm going to get back to the loop. Do I have still an element inside the list? True. So I'm going to save Rana and her grade inside the X. After I'm printing out, I'm going to get back. Does the list still have an element? True. So I'm going to store Huda inside the X and then print it out. After Huda, I'm going to get back to loop. Does the list has any more elements? It is going to be false, so I'm going to get out. Good? Okay, so now let's back to the important part, which is related to our yesterday lecture, how to write and read from a file. Okay? So to write to the file, what are we going to write to the file? the elements inside a list. Okay, so it's a public void, it's not going to return anything, and this is the name of the methods. We're going to use a try and catch that we learned yesterday. So inside the try, we put the part that we think it may have a problem. If there is any problem here, we're going to catch it through IO exceptions. So if, for example, you cannot read the file, if anything's happened here, the compiler will go right away to the exception. It creates an object called E, and then print this sentence. There is an error, and it's going to print an E, which is having information about the error. Okay, so let's back to our writing to file codes. So if I would like to write to file, I have to create first an object with a type file. So what is this file here? It is a class, it's a data type, it is constructor. What is this file here? Okay. Yes, it's a data type. Then the other file here, new, file word, which is after new. What is this file? No, it's not an object. And it's not a data type. Yes, we create an instance, but this file, we create an instance, but this file here is not an instance. What is this? Constructor. Thank you, Bushra. So we call the constructor. So the constructor is the same name, has the same name as the class. So the constructor of a file is going to get one argument with a type string. So this is we call a constructor file. So we create an object call or instance called f with a type file. Then we need to write to this file. So we create another object called br with a type print writer. Okay. And then we call the constructor print writer. And what we send to it here, we send an object with a type file. Okay. So now we just open or we just define where we're going to write. Okay. So now we're going to go over a writing process. How we're going to write to this file. So we'll go for, and again we use it for each. So for each string X inside the list, and this time we don't need to print out. We don't need to print in this on the screen. We need to print in the file. So that's why we use a name of the object br dot print in X. So this is exactly similar to what I just explained on the print list. Okay, here. What I just explained here, it is similar, but here we print system out, so it's going to print on the screen. However, in our example here, we get to print and we get to write on the file. So that's why we use the name of the object dot print line X, so it's going to print it out on the file. So it's going to go over a list one by one and write it down on the file. So we have the list here on the top. We have an F as a file object. We have a BR, it's a BR object, which is a point to the file. So first, for each, we get the first elements, Ali, we put it inside X. Then we said get X information and write it down here. So we will have Ali and his grade. Okay? Then, as long as I still have an element, I'll go one by one, store them first on X, and then bring them down on file. The last method we have is read from. Now, so we already wrote on the file. We need to read from the file. To read from the file, I need a special type of a class. So to write, we use print writer. To read, what I'm supposed to use? I'm supposed to create an object with which type? What's the data type of it? Okay, so I use a scanner to read from a file. And remember, we use a scanner not only to read from a file, we use it similarly to read from a keyboard. And this is what you already know since the 105, right? You already used the scanner before. So first, we create a file object, LF. You remember the 3 steps if you would like to read or write. Define, use, close. So we define, so those are the 2 steps to define. We create an object with call file and we put from where we're going to get this file. We create an object called SC that is going to get a file object. And now, because I would like to get over the file and I need to read the grade, first grade and second and third grade and calculate the average. So I create a temporary place for the grade, a temporary place for a name of the student, and a string which is going to have a line. The average always going to be double. The integer, the counter is going to count how many lists we have here. It is going to start from -1. We'll see why here. So first, I would like to go to the first line on the file. Assume I have a file, okay, line 1, 2, 3. So, and the pointer, let's see, it is going to point to F, which is going to point to this file. So it is started at the beginning now. So at the beginning, that's SC, that has next, true. So I'm going to go to the next. The first line, at the beginning, it has the name of the student, right? Then it has the first grade, the second grade, the third grade. We know the first one is a string, so we're going to use sc.next. The second element after the space is the first grade, and we know it is going to be integer. So we use the next integer and we store it at the temporary place, which is a G1. We know the third one is the grade 2 and it's integer, so we're going to use next int. For grade 3, we do the same things, next int. Good? So now we got the information. We know a name, we know the grades. We need to calculate the average. How we calculate the average? Grade 1 plus 2 plus 3, and we divide it by 3. Okay. After that, we increment the counter. Now, the counter here is going to be 0, right? Because before entering the loop, it was -1. Now here, it is going to be 0. What I would like to do, I would like to create a string. ليش حنا راح نعمل السترينج؟ لأن الآن حنا قرأنا المعلومات من الفايل الجريدز and we calculate the average. Then we would like to create a string which is a full line to store it again. فين راح نحفظها؟ راح نحفظها بالليست. راح نعمل update إلى الليست. And do you remember what's the difference لما نعمل add أو لما نكون حابين نعمل update? How we can update the array list? To add, if you remember during the array lists lecture, I told you if you would like to add is going to add element at the end, right? But what if you would like to update a certain place? What are you going to choose? If you would like to update, for example, now we would like to update the first place on the array list. حنا already الarray list اللي عندنا already فيها information, but we would like to update it. What are we going to choose? عندنا الليست كيف نقدر نعمل update إلى الانفورميشن. Anyone else, guys? How we can update array list information? Okay, here's Bushra. List that set الارجيومنت الاول يحدد لك الاندكس where you would like to update, which index فين المكان اللي حاب تعمل لي update, and what's the new value we would like to put it in this place. Okay, so حنا حابين نعمل update. We would like to update the first element at the beginning. الآن في المكان الأول اللي كان فيه عندنا علي والجريد اللي حقه حابين نكتب علي والجريد والافريج. So فين المكان من فين نجيبه؟ We already started from -1. That's for this is the reason. Now it is going to be 0. So at the beginning, at 0 index, I need to create. I would like you to put S, the new contents, المحتويات الجديدة. What it has, it is going to have a name as, and I'm going to retrieve a name. Okay. And if I said I get a list, what is this sentence going to retrieve me? List dot get is C. So C now is 0. List dot get 0 here. What is going to give me? What is this sentence going to return? What is going to give me? It is going to return a name or the grade or name or grades. Yes, so it's going to retrieve a name and the grades. Let's back to our array. So this is our array. If I said, so this is index 0. If I said get list.get 0, it is going to retrieve the content of it, which is include the name and the grades. Okay, so now here we will have a name as a name and the grade, and in addition to that we will have an average string, and we will add what we have calculated. Okay, and this is going to update inside the list. We will do this loop until the end of the file. Does the file has another line? Yes, we'll do it. The other line, yes, it does. For the second, third, and fourth student until the end. Whenever we finish reading the file, we have to close the scanner. And if there is any issue opening the file, the cache will deal with it. The file not found, for example, we will create an object called E. We don't create it actually. The compiler, the Java is going to create an exception object E, and it's going to print only this file is not found. Okay. And lastly, we have a test demo file, which is going to create an object called DL, and that object within that it's going to invoke the fill, the print list, write to file, read from the print list. So في البداية راح نعبي الاري list بالمعلومات وراح نطبع نشوف هي ايش هي النتائج. بعد كذا راح نكتب we'll write the list information inside the file and then we're gonna to read it from it. Okay, so let's see how it look like inside. I'll share the code with you guys. Okay. So this is the code for your reference. Okay. So this is the code. A demo file first. It has the information here. So we call it a demo file. We have a demo file, which is a constructor, and we have a fill method, write to file. It is going to write it down on text, student.text. We have a read from method, and finally we have the print list. Let's run this code. And see the results. Okay, here you go. So first, it is going to print the name and the average. You see, we just get the information from a list after updating it with the average. What if I would like to have the previous before we updated with the average and before? We can just move the print list and have it after the fill before we update it. Okay. You see here? So this is the previous list before updating. And then this is the new one. Good? Okay. And this is the student text. The student's text will have this information here. We have 4 lines with the student information. So any question about lab? Any question about the lab? So this is the end of the lab question. Any question? طيب في نقطة مهمة أبغاكم تفرقوا فيها. للي ذاكرين أمس كان عندنا بالإكسرسايز رقم 2 استخدمنا شيء وأبغى أشوف هل أنتم تفرقوا فيها ولا لا. هذا الآن إكسرسايز نمبر 2. I can share it with you as well. راح أعمل لكم sharing. الآن هذا اللي راح أرسله هذا الإكسرسايز 2 في الميتينج 8 اللي عملناه أمس. طيب تذكروا بالميتينج كان عندنا هذا المثال، عملنا كلاس اسمه ديل ريكتانجلز وبعد كذا قلنا دوت كرييت، صح؟ كتبنا اسم الكلاس وبعد كذا قلنا دوت وبعد كذا اسم الميثودز. طيب مثالنا اليوم ما استخدمنا اسم الميثودز او اسم الكلاس. اسم الكلاس كانت ديمو فايل، صح؟ عملنا انستنس اسمها دي ال ومن الانستنس هذه هي اللي كانت تنادي تعمل انفوك للميثود. هل هنا اقدر استعمل مثل ما استعملت امس اكتب اسم الكلاس واقول دوت اذا اقول فل؟ هل هذا صحيح؟ هل راح يطلع لي ايرور ولا لا؟ وابغاكم تستنتجوا ليش. ليش بمحاضرة الامس، ليش في محاضرة امس لما كنا نعمل الديل ريكتانجل هنا قلنا الديل ريكتانجل اسم الكلاس، بعد كذا قلنا دوت وكتبنا عملنا انفوكت الى الميثود دايركتلي، صحيح؟ ولكن الان بالمثال اللي حقنا ما نقدر نكتب اسم الكلاس اللي هي الفايل ديمو وبعد كذا نقول دوت ونكتب اسم الميثودز. ليش؟ في احد يعرف؟ في حد يعرف ليش؟ ليش هنا قدرت اعمل invoke directly باسم الكلاس بينما اليوم او بالامثله كلها اللي عملناها مسبقا كلنا نعمل object. يس ما عملنا object، بس شوفي هي هنا تشتغل يا لجان. هذا المثال اللي حق امس، الان لو اعمل له run راح يعمل run. انا ما عملت object، مع كذا قدرت استخدم اسم الكلاس واعمل invoke فيها بدون ما اعمل object او instance، لانها مثل كلهم ميثودز في الحالتين. لا مش على لسان الاسم مختلف، لا مش على اساس انها بنفس الكلاس، هي كلاس مختلفه. عندنا هنا المين وعندنا الديل ريكتانجل بمثال ثاني. لا هي مش عاملين انهرتد. لو اروح لكم الان بالديل كلاس الديل ريكتانجل هي مش عامله انهرتد، مش اكستند الى اي كلاس. لا مش علشان التايب، هو كان جاتت. انا لو بايدي الدرجات كان اعطيت اللي يجاوب 5 درجات عليها. مين يعرف ليش هنا بالمثال اللي حق امس؟ اوكي thank you because it's static. الجواب هو صحيح، يعطيك العافيه. لان الميثودز هنا، شوفوا الميثودز لما عملناها امس الرايت تو فايل نوعها static، الكرييت نوعها static، الاري ليست نوعها static. لما تكون الميثود نوعها static تقدر انك تعمل لها invoked او مناداه فقط باسم الكلاس. يعني هنا ديل ريكتانجل اسم الكلاس. طيب اللي حاب يطلع يقدر يطلع. خليني لحظه اسجل اخذ القيام. اللي حاب يطلع انا ام دان with المحاضره، بس هي هذه النقطه حسيت ان هي مهمه ان just raise it up للي حاب. just give me a second. خليني اسجل الحضور. نود الاتندنس. اوكي اللي حابب يطلع يقدر يطلع. we're done. فهمتوا هالنقطه؟ لاحظوا هنا ما قدرنا نعملها لو رجعنا الى الديمو فايل. for example الريد فورم والفل هنا مش نوعها static، فاساس كذا ما قدرنا ان احنا نستخدمها دايركت. تمام؟ فقط هي هذه النقطة. اذا انتم حابين شوفوها هنا، يعني هم شوية يغششوكم او بالاحرى لا، يعني من الاشياء الجود براكتس ان شاء الله اذا صرتم مطورين انكم تعرفوا تقروا الايرور وتعرفوا ايش هو يقول لك الان non-static methods الفل cannot be referred from static contents. انت تستخدميها refer to static contents اذا كانت هي الفل already static تقدري تناديها. فهو قال لك هنا ليش هي اساسا انت صار عندك ايرور. يس تقدري تعمليها static. اوكي؟ اي سؤال بخصوص المحاضره؟ اللي ما عنده سؤال تقدروا تتفضلوا. بخصوص الاسبوع الجاي، صحيح الاسبوع الجاي راح يكون لونج ويكند، يعني يوم الاثنين ما راح يكون في محاضره. في يوم الثلاثاء راح ناخذ يعني راح نعطي بداهل المحاضرة. طيب الكويز I have no idea. مس ملك will contact you. هي راح ترسل لكم ايميل بخصوص الكويز. بس بخصوص المحاضرة يوم الاثنين ما راح يكون في محاضرة، بس الثلاثاء نفس وقت المعمل راح ناخذ فيها محاضرة. طيب راح ارسل ايميل فيها again. Okay. Unfortunately I don't do this. I cannot, sorry. مو I would not like to اني اعطيه الخمس درجات. I wish I have control over الجريد. بس في رولز معينة لازم نمشي عليها. يس المعمل راح يكون ساعة واحدة. اساسا هي المفروض اليوم هذا الاسبوع اللي هو امس كنت المفروض اعطيكم مراجعة. الاسبوع الجاي محاضرة، بس لان الاسبوع الجاي ما في محاضرة فانا هذا الاسبوع اعطيتكم المحاضرة وخليت المراجعة الاسبوع الجاي. فوقت المعمل راح ناخذ المراجعة اللي كانت اساسا مقررة ان هي تنعطى امس هنا. فالاسبوع الجاي وقت المعمل راح يكون يوم الثلاثاء راح ناخذ مراجعة. تمام. ما اعرف، ما عندي فكرة صراحة بخصوص الاختبار تواصلوا مع مس ملك و I believe ان هي راح ترسل لكم ايميل. Okay? So have a nice long weekend. استمتعوا بالاجازة الطويلة. Unless you have a quiz. طيب اللي يطلبوا السلايدات انا الان بس تخلص المحاضرة راح ارسل لكم الايميل اللي فيه الريكوردد اللي حق الكلاسات بالاضافه اللي هي الريكوردينج بالاضافه الى الفولدر اللي فيه السلايدات كلها. تمام. واذا كنتوا راح تجلسوا شويه بعد معايا راح اعمل لكم هو الان while you are waiting. Okay, copy here. already اخذت الحضور، اللي حاب يطلع يقدر يطلع. تفضلوا. no مش مسموح ان احنا نشرح الواجب unfortunately يا معنا. If you have a specific question about the lecture about the lab اكيد راح اقدر اجاوبك عليه، لكن بخصوص الواجب مش مسموح ان احنا نشرحه. الحضور عليها 5 درجات. محاضرة الاثنين ما راح يكون فيه، بس هل راح يكون فيه اختبار او لا I have no idea. إن القرار لسه واصل جديد، ف يعني في ترتيبات معينة راح يتفقوا عليها ويرسلوا لكم هي. طيب مش مشكلة إن شاء الله. مثلا حسب رياضيات أظن. يس في إجازة يا إبراهيم، لونج ويكند. أنت ما استلمت الإيميل من الجامعة؟ الأحد والاثنين راح يكون إجازة. طيب اللي لسه موجودين، بس إذا ممكن أحد يدخل على ال LMS ويجرب يدخل على الرابط اللي حق المعمل الآن، يعني يطلع ويرجع يدخل على الرابط من ال LMS يتأكد هل هو الرابط معمول له أبديت. مين ممكن يعمل كذا؟ أنا جربتها من عندي ستيل ما عمل له أبديت. أوكي ورد، أنت اعملي خروج وادخلي جربي بال LMS شوفي هل هو عملوا لها أبديت ولا لا. طيب يس يو كان جو. أنا قلت لكم من زمان أخذت الحضور، المحاضرة خلصت من زمان يا نايف، من زمان قلت لكم تفضلوا واللي حاب يطلع يطلع. أنا بس كنت أجهز الإيميل اللي استلموا الإيميل، إذا أحد لسه موجود بس تتأكدوني أن الإيميل فيه الملفات. كانوا في طلاب يقولوا أنه هو الملف اللي حق ميتينج 8 مش موجود، فأنا عملت لكم مشاركة إلى الملفات كلها كاملة موجود عندكم الميتينج 8 بالإضافة إلى ملف اللي هو الإيميل وصلكم تمام يا شريف. راح يحتوي على رابط إلى جميع المحاضرات اللي أخذناها، بالإضافة إلى أنكم راح تشوفوا ملف موجود فيه المراجعة الريفيجن بارت اللي راح نعمله إن شاء الله الأسبوع الجاي. طيب هذه took about duration الوقت مع مس ملك. طيب اللي راحوا يجربوا اللينك رجعوا ولا لسه؟ ورود وإبراهيم I believe. للأسف. طيب شكرا إبراهيم، راح أرجع أرسل لهم إنهم يعملوا أبديت. طيب اللي حاب يطلع خلاص يطلع. أنا خلصنا كل شيء، أرسلنا الإيميل ووصلكم الإيميل وتأكدتوا منه وجاوبنا على الأسئلة. إذا ما عندكم شيء تقدروا تطلعوا.